by
We have to stop on.
Well, you know who the
policy right
penitent
now.
is.
Hmm?
You know who the penitent is.
Yeah, it's face to face. Just it's they used to put in.
Are we?
And it's quiet.
Well, they used to put in the confessional
They're
for
still-
hearing
It's
impaired.
still not,
It's good. You're good.
okay,
Are we started?
Yes. I think that was okay conversation.
It would be a way
No.
to do it.
All right. Well, here we are. It is Wednesday, April 29th, and
What is today?
Wednesday, April 29th.
Catherine of Siena.
Catherine of Siena. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Mass. Yeah, today it was Catherine of Siena, and especially the homily that I was listening to about all of the bloodshed and difficulties that occurred
Mm-hmm.
during her time, and she was able, with her mystical gifts, to see that blood out on the street from all the warfare and stuff as being actually the blood of Christ shed again, and praying for unity and praying for peace.
Yeah.
She was very powerful.
Homily I did was that it was the persecution in Jerusalem that led to the spread of faith into Samaria and other places.
Right.
It was the destruction of Jerusalem that led to the church moving to Rome.
That was the diaspora. Yeah.
So you just don't know what good comes from tragedy.
Yes.
It's unknown.
Father John, would you bless our conversation?
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for all of the gifts and all the charisms, and especially today we thank you for the gift of the charism of the Knights of Malta. Strengthen them, inspire them in their leadership and in their service to others, that they may be an example for the entire church of what it means to serve and to love. We ask this in the name of Jesus our Lord.
Amen. Well, thank you. We decided to have a little conversation about the Order of Malta and its charisms, given that the Grand Master Fra Giacomo della Torre passed away yesterday after a long illness in Rome. And I thought I'd give a very quick intro to it, and then listen to your questions and see what I can do to help out. The order, its full name is the Sovereign Military Hospitaller Order of St. John of Jerusalem, of Rhodes, and of Malta. And I'll get into those details a little bit later on, but we started out being the Order of St. John of Jerusalem because there was a crying need in the 11th century, that is in the late 1000s, for pilgrims who were coming to Jerusalem, who were either coming on boats or walking all the way from Europe. At the time, Jerusalem was ruled by a Muslim, but there were fairly peaceful relations between the Order of St. John of Jerusalem and the Muslim authorities, because one of the principles of the Order of St. John of Jerusalem from the beginning has been to serve anyone in need, regardless of race, color, creed, or religion. And so we had lots of members who stayed in the hospital who needed medical care from any faith. And so not only did the order exist then, but it actually received a subsidy from the government to help maintain the hospital that was there. This hospital was in Old Jerusalem, and it was a massive building, furnished solely by donations. At a certain point in time in the early 12th century, this is the 1100s, the hospital was getting rich enough that some of the bishops in the area, as well as the princes in the area, started to say, it's time for us to take a cut of your charity that's coming in. And the group ended up, this is Blessed Gerard, who was a monk, had been in the Benedictine order and then had been the leader of this order, actually went to Rome and appealed for help, because the money that was designated for charity was going to be used for other purposes. And that's when Pope Paschal II, in 1113, issued a very famous papal bull, a papal letter with a lead stamp on it and everything, declaring that the order was being placed under the protection of the Holy See. And that's where we have been now for over 900 years. That papal bull still exists. It's in the library in Valletta in Malta, the National Library there. And so people can still inspect it and see it. So 900 years. That's really the core of our mission. We were running hospitals, and these were people from the Middle East as well as Europeans. And at a time when in Europe it was seen as being very damaging to take a bath or to wash, because that would cause you to become ill. The Middle Eastern medicine was very much up to date on herbs and medical procedures and even antiseptics without really knowing a lot about microorganisms and biology. So the Knights took that knowledge and incorporated it into the best European practices to have this hodgepodge of procedures, but it was the best of all possible worlds, and that's what allowed people to go to what we call the hospital. So our nickname from the beginning has been hospitalers. That's where the word actually came from. And the notion of a hospital was where you went to go to get well, as opposed to going to the place called the Hôtel de Dieu, the house of God, and that's where you went to die. So our charism from the beginning has been all about healing. And we had many thousands of pilgrims who would make that trip each year to go to Jerusalem to visit the Holy Land. And we were there when they had no place to go, no place to stay, no money, they were sick, whatever. And it was always done free of charge. So that was our charism. And then things then started to get more difficult when suddenly it was not safe for pilgrims to be on the road anymore. And so we started developing armed escorts for those pilgrims. And then there was a need for us to operate and defend castles when things got still more difficult. And then finally by 1297, that's over 300 years in Jerusalem, we were finally kicked out completely. By
The Turks.
Saladin. It was the Saracens who had come in. And I can go into the details about how that happened, but for most of that 300 years, the order actually had done a very good job of keeping the Egyptian Muslims to one side and the Saracen Turk Muslims on the other side, so that they would be rivals with each other, and there would be temporary alliances to rebuff invasions by the other. And then there were some mistakes made, and we were able to unify the Egyptians and the Turks to come together, and that's when the show was over. So partly our fault.
So when they said, now we're together, what do we need you for?
Well, it was what had happened was the Christian became the enemy per se, as opposed to being someone that you could live with. Mm-hmm. And that was the perception, and then it became difficult to go on. And that's unfortunate, and you can see even today in the news, there's still those rivalries between the Turks coming down into Syria, and you have the Egyptians with their concerns about what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza, and that's all lots of different peoples with lots of age-old differences. And fortunately, we have been able to go back to the Holy Land now after hundreds of years of being away, and we're able to maintain some medical facilities now, including a neonatal hospital in in Bethlehem. It's just 7 miles outside of Jerusalem, and it is the state-of-the-art, the best neonatal hospital in all of Palestine. It's where all the toughest cases go to, and we support that. That's our Order of Malta hospital. So I was going to say something about the long name there. Jerusalem and Rhodes and Malta, those are all places we lost. So there's a little bit of humility that goes there. We fought the battles we lost. We got kicked out of Jerusalem. We got kicked out of Rhodes in the 15
And then Napoleon.
30s. And then we got to Malta, and we were in Malta until 1798, and then Napoleon came and kicked us out. So since the early 19th century, the early 1800s, we have been headquartered in Rome on the Via Condotti, which is a very famous street by the Spanish Steps. And we have a city block there where on one half of the block you can see some of the finest international brands.
Yes.
And
Shopping galore.
we rent that space out to them.
Ah.
And on the back side of that block, there is a medical facility for people who have nowhere else to go. And that block has diplomatic status so that if you are truly in a vulnerable position, you can go there and be protected.
Interesting.
So right now we're going through a little bit of struggle because these great shops like La Perla and I'm forgetting jewelry shops, but the best names, they're all shut down now. And because they're shut down, they're not paying their full rent. And so that's creating an issue for us.
The
So,
dominoes fall.
right. So coronavirus is affecting everybody. So that's our basic mission. We've got over 13,000 people, nights and days around the world in about 50 different countries. We work in 120 different countries with different service projects, mostly having to do with disaster relief, sanitation, education for children, having to do with healthcare.
But can you talk a little bit about the spirituality? What's behind the spirituality of the nights? I think that explain that. You explained so much.
Well, I think it all goes back. Whenever you want to know something about a religious order, go back to the founder, because that's where the inspiration is, the vision. That's where the Holy Spirit started. Blessed Gerard was a Benedictine monk, we believe. There's not a lot of information on him, but he had been in Jerusalem for a number of years at, we think, one of the Benedictine monasteries. The Benedictines have this great tradition of welcoming, but they're also interior-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
They have this community and this commitment to rest in place. I think our Fra flunked the test. I think he had the spirituality, but Blessed Gerard saw the need out in the streets, and he decided that he needed to do something on what's happening on the other side of the walls.
Before you continue,
Yeah.
I don't know if that everybody would know the word fra.
Oh, Fra. Oh, good point. It's just a Latin term for brother.
Yeah.
These started out as religious brothers from the beginning, similar to how the Franciscans started as brothers. The difference is Franciscans, 200 years later when they were started, it only took one generation before priests started taking control of the order. And the Order of Malta, because of its military aspect, could never be governed by priests. So we have always been a lay religious order, and that's been a challenge for us, but also I think one of our great blessings. So Blessed Gerard saw these people out in the street, and he decided we needed to provide hospitality, the Benedictine hospitality, for them, but in a more permanent way. And he set up hostels, small places where people could get off the street, get medical care, get food. And what he saw is that when he did that, he actually saw the face of Christ. And it transformed his life and transformed his followers to want to do likewise. And that's the core of our mission, and it's been that way. We do have a little different aspect to it because we're a lay religious order. We are very much hands-on. We're very much committed to working, and I think that's one of the reasons why the spirituality of the Order of Malta has been so powerful within the United States, because we are a doer country. And starting from zero members, less than 90 years ago, we now have 4,000 knights and dames that make up 1/3 of the order worldwide.
Wow.
and we're among the most active of all the associations in the world.
Is there any type of military function left at all? You know, it's a word that's loaded with concepts, different ideas in different people's minds when they hear military.
There are some what we call military trappings. They just really have to do with the dress more than anything. But I used to say there was a time when the order was very much involved in military engagements. The only things we like to kill now are microbes.
Yeah.
There's no military function left. But I've got an interesting story on that. After World War II, all of the Italian airplanes were grounded by the Allied forces. And we wanted to get the planes flying again. So the Italian government repainted all of the planes with the Order of Malta Cross on it. And so they were allowed by the Allies to get back up into service because they were providing all these medical needs and other shipments that needed to be made. And the only reason that could happen is the Order of Malta, alone among all religious orders, is actually a sovereign nation. It has a seat in the United Nations. It's a kind of a bizarre situation because we are a nation with almost no people. We only have like 8 acres in 2 different places that have extraterritorial protection because of an agreement with the Italian Republic. So we have our own security. We follow all Italian laws for basic things, but it is formally part of another country when you go onto that place.
Like an embassy.
Yeah, exactly. And we actually had embassies. The Order of Malta has embassy, formal diplomatic relations with 110 countries.
You know what the order reminds me of, though? To understand the first Christian church in Rome and how it developed was that you had all the sick and the poor living outside the wall, extramural. And it was the Christians for the first time that began caring for the sick and the poor. And it was like, who are these people who are doing that? Who are they? And they won over everyone because of a lack of indifference. Everybody else seemed to be indifferent to them, and they said, how can I serve you? Mm-hmm. And from there it just exploded. But when you do that, whether Mother Teresa, Knights of Malta, the early Christians, you're making such a statement.
Well, it's putting what Christ taught us into practice. And there is a tremendous power from that. And that's something that I've seen, I've witnessed that, I can't tell you how many times. People who have gotten involved in the order as a volunteer or as a member, and they go to their first homeless shelter or their first activity where it's a little out of their comfort zone. And that's a normal experience. We all have that. The question is, how do you respond to that? And I've just seen so many miracles where people were uncertain or worried, or is this for me? And then suddenly they're serving a stranger, and you might get a smile, you might get a little thank you, you might not get anything at all from that person, but it resonates with them, and they say, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
I've heard some ignorant people who don't know about the Knights of Malta and know them from afar say, that's a rich person's organization. It's all about their ego. Right? And yet you're saying something that is absolutely the opposite of that. And can you just develop that a little bit? I just think it's part of a continual conversion when you go and you begin to serve and you begin to love. Because unfortunately, a lot of times the church hasn't done a great job of getting lay people and said, you can change the world.
That's right.
But it's in organizations like the Knights where you are changing the world.
Well, we have been blessed by our vocation, again, which comes from Blessed Gerard, and you have to stay faithful to that. Whenever you get into mission creep, there are some problems that can happen. And the example of that, we've had discussions where we see a need for education. Well, shouldn't we start building schools? Shouldn't we, there are almost an unlimited number of needs. And the focus and our strength comes from having a laser eye view on what we're really good at. The Jesuits built a lot of universities over the last several hundred years. And some of those universities are still thriving. Others are having some challenges, but they're good at that. There aren't very many theologians or scholars in the Order of Malta. That's not what we're known for. What we are known for is that service to the poor and sick, and it typically comes from people who have had very good professional careers, who've had very good educations, who are a part of the church that's been very blessed. But they look at themselves and they say, but I'm part of the body of Christ here. What should I do to those who are less fortunate? And Jesus gives us, through the gospel message, all the answers to that. The question is, how do you put it into practice? And you can do it by yourself. And there are many, many people who do. And that's great. But the advantage of a religious order and an organization with the history of the Order of Malta is it makes it easier to get the right formation, to understand the spiritual principles, to work together in teams, and to just dive in and know that there's structure there.
Noblesse oblige.
A question.
Okay.
So if someone is a lay order, if someone from the order eventually joined the clergy as a priest or deacon, do they have to resign from the order?
Pretty much, yes. They're no longer a member. We do have we have priests who are chaplains in the order. But it's interesting, their ministry is not to govern. They can't be on any board. They can't be on our sovereign council. They can't be the Grand Master. They're there to minister to us, to the members, and then to those whom we serve. And that balance is actually, we stumbled onto that just because of the military elements that existed before. But as I think about the role of the laity in the church, I think there's something very powerful there about engaging the laity and letting lay members know this is your church. This is not the priest's church. Priests are very important. They're essential to the church because they provide that shepherding that we all need to have. But they're not there to govern in the same way that lay people and clergy together are part of governing. But that part hasn't been developed very much in our theology.
How often has that happened that someone has been ordained out of the order?
It happens most frequently with deacons.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have someone who will be a member of the order, and then they're called to become a deacon. And depending on their state within the order, they can become a deacon and still have an affiliation with the order. But typically, the way that it runs is a priest or a deacon is invited to become a member of the order as a priest or as a deacon. So it comes in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us, we have a group of fras, the brothers, who make vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience.
And how about religious sisters?
Actually, they're at the same time that the order was founded in Jerusalem. There also was a group of sisters because they ministered to the women. There were two parts of the hospital. They have their own separate history, and there are a few sisters, probably fewer than a dozen, still remaining in the order in Malta, and then in a small group in Spain. But they're very tiny now, and their ministry now is just wholly as cloistered nuns praying for the order.
Mm-hmm.
In the 18th century, 19th century, that time frame when we got kicked out of Malta, the order evolved to allow women to join, and they're called dames. Ladies of Malta, but that's the French word, but dames of Malta. And they have the same rights and privileges that the knights do, except when you get to, say, being on the Sovereign Council or something. And because the Sovereign Council has a governing relationship over the religious brothers, it has to be all male. I've thrown a lot at you.
What is your biggest challenge in the 21st century? Right now. What's your biggest challenge?
Well, just to speak of a current example with the coronavirus, we have 55 charities that we support and work at every day or every week in the Western United States. When the coronavirus item hit and it had this major effect on us, before the government said anything about what you can't do, we got together and said, what should we do? And the first thing that our first principle was do no harm to the homeless. And so we stopped having that direct contact because we were worried that we could be carriers and they're a much more vulnerable population than we are. So we suspended our works for about 2 weeks, but under the government rules, we are actually qualified as an essential organization because of our ministry. And so we quickly reassembled and figured out how we could serve in a safe way. And what we're doing now primarily is working in homeless shelters to make sandwiches, to make meals, but doing it on using tables where we're separated far apart. And we're also making what we call hygiene kits, which are little plastic bags that have all the essentials that you would want to have if you found yourself out on the street. Socks, toothpaste, toothbrush, all the things, soap and all that. And we're making over 1,000 of those a week right now. And then we're distributing them to the charities. And how are we assembling them? We're assembling them at home. So we'll have the van come by, drop off in bulk the stuff, and we all have our masks on, we're separated. They drop off the bag, I walk over, pick up the bag, take it home, it's on the dining room table, we set everything up, package it all up, and then put it back in the bag, and then they come back, and then with separation and all that, then they pick it up and they take it. And that's being replicated in over 100 Knights and Dames houses in the Western United States right now.
How does the order get the money that you need to keep all the ministries going?
Good question. We do not take any government funding at all. 99% of the money comes from the members themselves. But we make a big financial commitment to the order because we know how that money is being used. And the thing that we can say with some pride is that 100 cents on the dollar of every gift goes directly to the poor and sick. We know that because all of us are volunteers.
Internationally, how much is that a year?
That's about between $2 and $3 billion a year.
Billion.
Billion. Yes. Now, some of the international money comes from national governments. So the German government contributes probably close to $1 billion a year for the work. And probably half of the hospitals in all of Germany are actually run by the Order of Malta. And if you've ever been to Europe, you'll see ambulance services. And more than half of all the ambulances in Germany are run by the Order of Malta or the Protestant version, the Johanniter Order. Another long story because we, of course, were developed as an order 400 years before the Reformation, 400 years before Luther. So there were knights and dames, there were knights of justice in Germany, and they had to switch their allegiance to Lutheranism because of Luther and the political situation at the time. But even though they became Lutheran, they continued to pay their annual head tax to the Grand Master in Rome. Or the Grand Master at the time was in Malta. This was in the 1500s. Because they had made that vow of poverty to the Grand Master.
I'm only laughing because you said 2 to 3 billion, which means only because I heard on the news today, I think it's Forbes magazine put out the list of billionaires in the country or in the world or something. And Kanye West wasn't included on them, and he got mad, so he took all his financial records to Forbes to say, look, I'm worth between 2 and 3 billion. So they added it to the list.
Well, I know.
It just happened to be the same number, incidentally.
I now know who I should be calling on
Yeah.
the phone.
Kanye,
Yeah.
if somebody's interested in the Knights, how should they go about contacting?
Well, the best way to get more information is to go on the internet and go to orderofmalta.int for international. That's the main website for the Order Worldwide, and you can look at and click on all the national associations. So if you're in Hong Kong, Singapore, Chile, Argentina, Europe, Canada, United States, we're the Western Association for the United States. That's our particular group here. One caveat, though, because of our history and some of the military trappings and all that sort of thing, there are some false orders out there that you will also see on the internet. It's funny, there are no false orders about the Dominicans or about the Franciscans, but we have this problem of false orders. And what these people do is they claim to be the Knights of Malta. They claim to be doing good works. I even remember one case where someone in Dallas, Texas, was building a Knights of Malta hospital and seeking funds. You track that down. They have no affiliation with the Order of Malta, and the money doesn't go where they say it goes. It goes into their pocket. I had a case that just was reported to me today from someone in Arizona who was defrauded by a group claiming to be the Order of St. John, the Knights of Malta. So those kinds of things we investigate, and we have shut down a number of them over the years, and if necessary, we will go to court to get an order forcing them to change their name. We support, anytime you're offering charity, that's great, but do it in your own name.
That's not unfamiliar to us. And we have to deal with the fake Roman Catholic priests who will go to Forest Lawn or Rose Hills and do funeral masses there, and they'll tell them, oh yeah, it's Catholic, and it's fake.
For the money, yeah.
Or tell you, come over here, we'll do your baptism and we'll do your confirmation in 2 months instead of 2 years.
And they won't register it?
Nothing. But they tell them, oh, we're Catholic. And they're not. Yeah, we deal with fakes all the time.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that you have to do that because it makes our job a lot harder.
Yeah.
We'd like to devote it just to the people who are needy, and instead we have to protect them as well.
In fact, one woman said to me, was that for First Communion? How come I can do it in 1 month there, and for you it's 2 years? I said, well, because they only care about your money. We care about your children.
Yeah, that's very true. But it's a huge gift, and for someone who's interested in serving in a community of dedicated Catholics who want to put the gospel message into action, the door is open.
Is there a procedure if somebody wanted to enter a novice?
Well, we have different types of membership depending on the commitment that they want to make. The Froz brothers make the total commitment. They're poverty, chastity, and obedience, and they are religious just like any other religious brother in the Catholic Church.
And they live in community?
Well, we try to do community, but we're widely separated because we're in all these different countries. So the reality is the community that the Froz have is around the non-Fra members of the order who are there. So I've got some dear friends who are Froz. Actually, one just passed away a couple of weeks ago. And he lived in San Francisco, but he was there at the charity every morning and was our example so that other members who are not Froz could participate. Then we have a group of people who have made a vow of obedience. And then the great majority of our members are what we call third class, and they are they're more than what a tertiary would be in other orders, but they haven't made that irrevocable vow of obedience. And they represent maybe 98% of our members. And then we have a whole host of others, even larger group of volunteers who are auxiliary members of the order, and they number in the over 100,000. And so that's where a lot of the work gets done. So we try to have this vision of care, of concern, and we want to be that as a community as well, to support each other. And I think it's especially in this time when the culture can be so contrary to Christian life, that sticking together really helps.
Something, oh my gosh, time goes by so fast, but
Oh, yes.
let me ask you one last question here. We talked about it off camera last week sometime, but could you just explain the difference between the Knights of the Order of Malta, the Knights of Columbus, and the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre?
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, by far the largest entity are the Knights of Columbus. That was a group, it's a Catholic social organization that was created at the end of the 19th century in Ohio, led by a priest to provide services to the immigrants coming in. And I forget his name now. McGivney. But he did an extraordinary job. And it's primarily an American organization, but the Knights of Columbus have now expanded to some other countries. They provide benefits for their members and have an insurance fund that's there that has generated a lot of wealth, and it gives them an opportunity to make some major gifts. The Knights and Ladies of the Holy Sepulchre are actually part of a resurrected group from the middle of the 19th century. They existed for several hundred years, and then in the 15 or 1600s went out. But then they were brought back, and they're led by a cardinal. So they're a religious organization that is devoted to serving the Holy Land, the Christians who are in the Holy Land. So they support the schools there, the hospitals there. We work very closely with the Holy Sepulchre for the hospital that we have, Holy Family Hospital in Bethlehem. That's an Order of Malta work, and they support us in that, and we support them.
But all of their work is in the Holy Land.
All of their charitable work is in the Holy Land, but they are throughout the world.
Yeah.
And they're led by a cardinal, and membership comes through the bishop of each diocese. Order of Malta is a religious order, the only one that's a religious order in that traditional sense of the word, like the Franciscans or the Jesuits or whatever. And we actually have to seek permission from the bishop to come in and serve the poor and sick in his diocese. And I've been able to do that 3 times now in my 20 years as an active member as a Knight of Malta. And it's one of the most blessed experiences that you can have, to ask humbly for the privilege of serving the poor and sick in your diocese.
Have you ever been denied?
Yes. Once we were denied. So we're batting 3 out of 4, and I can't defend or explain that situation, but we pay our own way. We just want to help.
I'm going to tell you something that sounds bad, because I've done work with mustard seed communities for years. It takes care of Jamaica, Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, Malawi, Zimbabwe, primarily, well, not only, but primarily disabled children who have no parents. So mustard seed brings them in and keeps them from the time, whatever age they get them, as babies, whatever age, till their natural life ends. If it's at 90, they keep them till 90. And they also
That's beautiful.
deal with kids who were born HIV positive and have no parents.
Right.
And they can train to get jobs and work, raise them, give them education, get them job and work, but they help them with their medicine for as long as they live to keep them alive. But I was, let me not say the country, but Father Gregory, who founded and runs it, I was involved with him and seeing they could expand into another country where there was a lot of need and an offer of some land, and someone, he approached the archbishop there and said, we'd like permission to come in and blah blah blah. And the answer was more or less, yeah, I'll let you come for $200,000 or something like that. It was disheartening.
Well, we have a perfect church, but very imperfect people.
Yeah.
In the church, and I guess if it were the other way around, I would be very unhappy. But we have the grace of a perfect church, and the church is open to people who are flawed, and let's get that flaw corrected though, as soon as we can.
Amen. All right.
I think you have the closing prayer then,
I do.
Tony.
I'm going to make it simple. It's because I was recording the rosary today at Guadalupe Radio. Even though that's the other thing, I guess our English masses at Guadalupe Radio end on Friday.
Yes, and we need to talk about maybe Saturday starting at a
Right.
different chapel.
But yeah,
So we'll have news on that tomorrow.
and we have to. I don't know who has the mass there on Friday. It should be Marcos or Michael. There should be an announcement about where we're moving to, which I guess would be on the land at stphiliptheapostle.org on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out. We'll have to move quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look it up and email. Well, while you guys pray, I'll be able to look up who has
Part
done
of
that.
it. Just would be simple. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end.
Amen.
Amen.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you.
Huh?
I said St. Catherine of Siena.
Pray for us.